I want you to picture a luxury sports car, like an absolute masterpiece of engineering.
Right.
You're behind the wheel, the engine is roaring, the fuel is burning hot, the RPMs are redlining,
Hmm.
and, the entire chassis is just vibrating with the sheer power. It sounds completely unstoppable.
But there's a problem.
Yeah, a catastrophic problem. The transmission is stuck in neutral. You have all this horsepower, this incredible potential, and yet you are undeniably paralyzed right at the starting line. The tires aren't even moving.
Just burning fuel.
Exactly. Creating massive amounts of heat and friction and literally going nowhere. So today we're doing a deep dive into the exact biological reason your brain gets trapped in that neutral state.
It's a painful state to be in.
Oh, it's exhausting. But we're also going to look at how a pretty bizarre rapid-fire neurological intervention is currently curing PTSD faster than mainstream therapy. Our mission today is to transform this raw information into pure, actionable momentum for you.
I love that. Actionable momentum.
Right. We are fully dismantling what the sources call the frozen start.
And that feeling of revving in neutral is arguably the most exhausting state a human being can endure. I mean, you are expending maximum energetic resources, but gaining absolutely zero forward momentum.
Yeah, you're just draining the tank.
Exactly. And the first thing we really have to do for you, the listener, is dismantle the whole narrative around this. Because so many high performers, particularly those dealing with ADHD or executive dysfunction, they internalize this paralysis as like a moral failing.
Oh, 100%. They think they're just lazy.
Right. They look at the unfinished project or the unwritten email and think, well, I know what to do. I have the drive. I'm just lazy. It gets framed as a lack of willpower. But what we are actually looking at is a harsh physiological reality.
Okay, so it's not a character flaw.
Not at all. It is literally a state of neuro-warfare.
Okay, neuro-warfare. I mean, that sounds like a pretty dramatic marketing term. Are we really talking about warfare, or are we just talking about standard, modern-day distraction?
We are talking about an internal biological conflict. I mean, the statistics from our sources show this is a 1 in 5 reality. 1 in 5 people are fighting a literal daily battle inside their nervous systems against executive dysfunction.
Wow, 1 in 5.
Yeah, and against emotional dysregulation and rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. The brain's self-management system, which is the prefrontal cortex network that initiates tasks and sustains attention, is under siege.
So the system isn't broken, it's just under attack.
Precisely. Doesn't mean your brain is broken.
Yeah.
It means the system is operating under extreme, inconsistent chemical conditions. The neural warfare is that battle between your logical intentions and your primal survival-based neurochemistry.
Okay, so if we go back to that sports car analogy, if we have the engine, the intelligence, the knowledge, why are we stuck? Like, what is mechanically disconnected?
Well, horsepower is entirely useless if the vehicle's chassis is out of alignment. If the wheels are pointing in opposing directions, hitting the gas pedal harder doesn't make you go faster.
It just threatens to tear the car apart.
Exactly. It creates more friction. In human terms, true alignment, what clinical frameworks call personal sovereignty, requires the synchronization of 4 distinct bodies: the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the energy bodies.
Hold on, let me jump in here. Mental, physical, and emotional. I think we all intuitively grasp those. Like, we know what it feels like when our body aches or we're sad or we're overthinking.
Right.
But the energy body sounds like we are veering straight into woo-woo crystal healing territory. How does an energy body actually manifest on a random Tuesday morning in a corporate office?
That's a fair point. Let's strip away all the esoteric associations and look at this through the lens of the sensory economy. This is a concept utilized heavily in neuro-inclusive transpersonal coaching.
The sensory economy.
Think of your energy body as the RAM on your computer. It's your immediate active processing capacity. In the sensory economy, every single stimulus you encounter costs you currency.
Currency meaning energy.
Exactly. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the ping of a Slack message, the tightness of your collar, the ambient conversation 2 desks over your nervous system literally has to spend processing power on all of that.
Oh, man. It's like having 70 tabs open in a web browser.
Yes, perfect analogy.
The tabs you aren't even looking at are still draining the computer's memory in the background, leaving you with almost 0 bandwidth to actually run the main program you need for work.
And that bandwidth drain is exactly what causes the 4 bodies to fall out of alignment. When we experience chronic stress, or what trauma-informed psychology calls small trauma.
Wait, what's small to trauma?
It's an accumulation of things: microaggressions, rapid context switching, or just the baseline anxiety of modern life. When that happens, our psyche initiates a brilliant but incredibly costly survival mechanism. It splits.
Splits.
We experience disembodiment. Because the sensory cost of feeling everything in that environment is just too high, we subconsciously block our vital energy flow. We disconnect from our physical sensation to protect our mental processing.
Wow, so we basically numb ourselves from the neck down just to survive the workday.
Precisely. And the direct consequence of that numbing is the narrowing of your window of tolerance. Your window of tolerance is that optimal regulated zone of the nervous system where you can actually encounter stress without losing your capacity to think logically.
Right, the zone where you can handle a tough email without freaking out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you are disembodied, that window shrinks to the size of a pinhole. The slightest provocation pushes you entirely out of the window.
And what happens then?
You either shoot up into hyperarousal, which is a state of panic, rapid heartbeat, crippling anxiety, or you drop into hypoarousal, which is dissociation, brain fog, and just complete numbness.
So if you ignore the sensory economy, say by skipping sleep or just ignoring constant sensory overload, your emotional body is left utterly defenseless.
Utterly defenseless, yes.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the most excruciating phenomenon we found in all the source material for this deep dive. The frozen start. Let's make this really tangible for you listening. Let's paint a scenario.
Let's do it.
Say you're sitting at your desk, you get a message from your boss that just says, "Can we chat?" No context, nothing. For a neurotypical brain, that might register as a mild curiosity.
Right, just a standard request.
But for someone dealing with a narrowed window of tolerance and rejection-sensitive dysphoria,
It initiates a 5-alarm biological fire.
yeah, the RSD spiral is immediate and violent. Your brain instantly builds a catastrophic narrative, right? Like, I mess up that presentation, they realize I am an imposter. I am getting fired today.
The worst-case scenario becomes absolute truth in a millisecond.
And in that exact moment, the ability to open a spreadsheet or even reply to an email just vanishes. Your executive function evaporates. You are frozen.
We really need to look at the exact biological cascade happening in that moment. It's so important to realize it is not just a bad mood. The mental CEO of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, has literally been ousted from power.
Ousted. A biological coup.
A complete coup. When that perceived rejection hits, your amygdala, which is the primitive threat detection center deep in the brain, interprets the Slack message as a literal predator, like a tiger in the room.
Because it doesn't know the difference between a bad email and a physical threat.
Exactly. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Blood flow is actually restricted from the prefrontal cortex and redirected to your extremities for a fight-or-flight response. Your logic center is literally starved of oxygen and glucose.
So the bridge between intention and action is physically washed out by a flood of stress hormones. That explains the case studies we saw in the ADHD coaching literature so perfectly.
Right.
A person can have the project open on their screen, they can know the exact steps required, the deadline is in an hour, and they are just staring blankly, losing hours trying to initiate.
Because the activation energy required to type the first word feels biologically equivalent to pushing a boulder up a mountain. This is why traditional productivity advice is so incredibly insulting to someone in this state.
Oh, don't even get me started on the productivity advice.
Right. Telling someone trapped in a frozen start to just use a planner or set a timer or try harder is clinically useless. You cannot outthink an amygdala hijack. Insight alone does not restore blood flow to the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, if the bridge is out, handing someone a high-definition map doesn't help them cross the river. It just makes them more aware of how completely stuck they are.
Exactly.
We need a rapid neurological circuit breaker, a manual reset for the nervous system. Which brings us to the credibility piece of this deep dive, the King's College London pilot study on UK veterans suffering from PTSD.
Yes. This data fundamentally challenges how we view therapeutic intervention. They took UK veterans with severe PTSD and compared 2 distinct treatments.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The first group received trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or TFCBT. This is the gold standard mainstream approach. It relies on prolonged exposure, talking through the trauma, and habituation.
And what were the results for that group?
The veterans going through that mainstream TFCBT required an average of 18 clinical sessions, 18 weeks of confronting horrific memories, and the result was an 8-point reduction on their PTSD symptom scale.
That doesn't sound very high.
It gets worse. At the end of it, only 16% of those veterans no longer met the clinical criteria for PTSD.
Wow. So 18 weeks of grueling emotional trauma reliving, and only 16% are actually cured. The emotional toll of those 18 weeks is staggering, and the yield is just minimal.
Minimal. Then the researchers looked at the second group of veterans. This group received a specific intervention based in neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP.
Okay, let me push back hard right here. Because NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, to anyone who's been around the internet or self-improvement spaces, that term carries a massive amount of baggage.
It definitely does.
It sounds like 1980s sales seminars, questionable pickup artistry, and pseudoscientific life coaching. Are we seriously comparing something like that to clinical cognitive behavioral therapy for combat veterans?
I know. The skepticism is completely warranted, given how NLP has been heavily commercialized and sometimes weaponized. But we have to separate the marketing buzzword from the actual neurological mechanism.
Okay. What is the mechanism?
At its core, clinical NLP is the study of neuro-associative conditioning. It's about how the nervous system rapidly codes and decodes physical and emotional states. And the data from this rigorous, randomized pilot study is frankly irrefutable.
Made the numbers on us.
The NLP group required an average of only 3 sessions. Just 3.
3 sessions compared to 18?
Yes. And those 3 sessions resulted in an 18-point reduction in PTSD symptoms. Most importantly, at the 20-week follow-up, an astonishing 48% of the veterans in the NLP group no longer met the diagnostic criteria for PTSD.
Wait, really? Almost half the patients lost their PTSD diagnosis entirely in just 3 weeks. That is insane. It's like finding a hidden service road on a map that bypasses 18 miles of gridlock traffic and drops you right at your destination.
That's a great way to look at it. It completely shatters the idea that deep neurological rewiring has to take months or years of painful processing.
It proves that rapid reconsolidation of traumatic memories is actually possible. We can intervene at the level of the nervous system incredibly quickly if we just use the right mechanical levers. We don't always need to talk the amygdala down. Sometimes we can manually switch it off.
Exactly. And the core NLP mechanism that allows for this rapid state change is known as anchoring.
Anchoring. Okay, we all have accidental anchors functioning in our lives right now. Like, you walk past someone wearing a specific brand of cologne, and your stomach instantly drops because it was the cologne your abusive ex wore.
A classic negative anchor.
Or, on the flip side, you hear the first 3 notes of a pop song from the summer you were 17, and you are immediately flooded with a visceral, full-body sensation of careless joy. Those are accidental, unmanaged anchors. How do we build an intentional one? How do we hack that mechanism so we can fire it on demand?
Well, the Institute of Applied Psychology breaks this down into a highly methodical 4-step process. You are essentially acting as the programmer of your own somatic responses.
Let's walk through it. Step 1.
Step 1 is recall. You must vividly identify and re-experience a high-intensity memory of the exact emotion you want to capture.
So if you are constantly battling RSD in the frozen start, you likely want to anchor a state of absolute unshakable confidence, or perhaps deep grounded calm.
Exactly. But here's the catch. This isn't just a mental exercise. You don't just sit there and think, oh, I remember being confident once. You have to actually induce the somatic state.
Induce it, like physically.
Yes. You have to step back into the memory fully associated. You see what you saw, hear what you heard, and most importantly, feel what you felt. You breathe the way you were breathing in that moment of triumph.
Oh, wow.
You allow the neurochemical cocktail of confidence to literally flood your bloodstream until your heart rate and posture match the memory. The biological intensity of the feeling determines the strength of the anchor.
So you are revving the engine of that specific emotion. And once that feeling is cresting, like once it is at its absolute peak, we move to step 2. Applying the anchor. What does that entail?
Exactly at the apex of the emotion, you apply a highly specific, unique physical touch. It cannot be something you do naturally throughout the day, like crossing your arms or rubbing your neck.
Because you would accidentally trigger or dilute the anchor all the time.
Precisely. It needs to be unique and precise. For instance, pressing the thumbnail of your right hand aggressively into the first knuckle of your left ring finger.
Okay, so I am completely flooded with the memory of crushing a major presentation. I'm feeling unstoppable. And right as that feeling peaks, I press that specific knuckle. What happens next?
Step 3 is critical. Break the state.
Break the state.
The moment the peak begins to subside, you release the knuckle and completely disrupt your own pattern. You force a hard mental reset. You stand up, look out the window, count the blue objects in the room, or physically shake out your limbs. You clear the neurological palette,
Why is breaking the state so important? Why not just sit in that good feeling? Let it ride out.
Because you only want the anchor wired to the peak of the emotion, not the inevitable come down. If you hold the knuckle as the feeling fades, you are wiring the anchor to the fading of confidence. Breaking the state ensures a clean, isolated circuit.
That makes so much sense. It's like cutting the recording before the song fades out. And that leads to step 4, test the anchor.
Right. Once you are back to a completely neutral, mundane state, you press that exact knuckle in the exact same way.
And if the neuroassociative conditioning worked, you will feel that literal wave of confidence or calm wash over your physiology. It feels like magic, but it is literally just synaptic plasticity.
It is the purest application of Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Oh.
By intentionally forcing a simultaneous activation of physical touch receptor and a massive emotional neurochemical release, you forge a new neural pathway. You create a manual override.
Let's apply this back to our frozen start scenario. You are staring at the Slack message. Can we chat? The amygdala hijack begins. The cortisol floods in. The window of tolerance slams shut. Instead of spiraling for 3 hours, you press the knuckle.
And boom! The physical touch sends a rapid electrical signal up the spine, completely bypassing the spiraling cognitive loops and forcefully initiates the release of the anchored neurochemistry.
It acts as a literal circuit breaker for the amygdala.
Exactly. The cortisol flood is interrupted. Your heart rate stabilizes. Blood flow begins to return to the prefrontal cortex, bringing the mental CEO back online.
The freeze is broken. The car is no longer in neutral. But just because the car is in gear doesn't mean we know where we are driving. A circuit breaker stops the electrical fire, but it doesn't rewire the house. How do we write new code so we don't just freeze on the very next email we receive?
That's the million-dollar question. Breaking the old pattern is only half the battle. Now we have to install the new program. To understand the mechanics of this, we look at the principles of Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill.
Yes, specifically from his seminal work, Think and Grow Rich. He outlines 3 core tenets. Desire, which is cultivating an intense, precise passion. Faith, which is the somatic visualization of success as a current reality. And autosuggestion, the practice of repeatedly training the subconscious mind with new directives.
I am going to push back again here. Napoleon Hill. We just went from complex PTSD neuroscience to a 1937 self-help book about visualizing wealth. For a lot of highly analytical people, autosuggestion sounds like standing in front of a mirror repeating, "I am a millionaire, I am successful," and just hoping the universe delivers a check. It feels deeply disconnected from the biology we've been discussing.
If you approach it as mere positive thinking, it absolutely is disconnected. And frankly, that is why affirmations fail for the vast majority of people.
Right, because you don't believe them.
Exactly. But Dr. Trish Lee's neuroscientific analysis of Hill's work completely reframes autosuggestion from mysticism into neurophysiology. You cannot reprogram a subconscious mind that is operating in a chaotic, stressed state.
Explain the brainwave mechanics of that. What is actually happening in the brain when someone is stressed out, staring at a mirror, and chanting affirmations?
When you are stressed, anxious, or trapped in the sensory economy's demands, your brain is dominated by high-frequency beta waves. Beta is the brainwave of alert, waking consciousness, but in its higher ranges, it was the brainwave of survival and frantic problem solving.
So it's a highly analytical, highly guarded state.
Extremely guarded. If you attempt to implant a new belief like, "I am safe, I am capable," into a brain dominated by high beta waves, the brain's analytical filter actively rejects it.
It just blocks it out.
It looks at the biological state of stress, looks at the affirmation, determines it is a lie, and discards it completely.
I love this analogy we talked about earlier. High beta is like trying to merge onto a massive highway during rush hour gridlock. There are horns blaring, cars cutting you off, exhaust everywhere. It is entirely chaotic, reactive, and defensive. If you are in gridlock, you aren't reprogramming your GPS destination. You are just trying not to crash.
That is exactly it.
But the state we need for autosuggestion is alpha. Alpha is like cruising on an open, empty highway at sunrise. It is smooth, flowing, and receptive. You can only safely pull over and install a new destination into the GPS when the highway is clear.
That visualization perfectly captures the neurophysiology. Alpha waves are slower, more coherent, and deeply linked to states of relaxation, creativity, and subconscious receptivity. In an alpha state, the analytical, guarding function of the conscious mind relaxes. The barrier between the conscious intention and the subconscious operating system becomes permeable.
Okay, so bringing it all together, you use the physical anchor, the knuckle press, to shatter the beta gridlock. That circuit breaker pulls you out of fight or flight and drops you into the calm, open highway of alpha. And that is the exact moment you apply Hill's principles.
Precisely. You visualize the specific outcome without the resistance of anxiety. You feel the somatic truth of the faith, and you plant the autosuggestion deeply into a nervous system that is actually receptive to the new programming.
What does this look like in practice for you, the listener, tomorrow morning? Like, how do we synthesize the alignment of the bodies, the NLP anchor, and the alpha state reprogramming into a daily, usable protocol? Let's implement what the sources call actionable alchemy, utilizing the PR framework. Problem, action, result.
Okay, the problem is clearly defined. The frozen start. It is the overwhelm, the RSD trigger, the amygdala hijack, leaving you paralyzed at the starting line with the engine revving.
And the action. We've pressed the anchor, we've dropped into alpha. What physical action do we take to get the tires actually moving?
The action is a highly specific, two-pronged attack executed while the brain is in that receptive alpha state. First, drawing from ADHD coaching frameworks, we implement the 5-minute agreement.
The 5-minute agreement.
Remember, the frozen start makes the activation energy of a task feel insurmountable. The goal here is to radically manipulate the physics of momentum by lowering the threshold of entry to almost zero.
So, when you are staring at a massive, complex project, do not agree to finish it. Do not even agree to do a good job on it. The perfectionism will trigger the beta waves again. You make a binding contract with yourself to physically move and engage with the task for exactly 5 minutes, and then you have full permission to walk away.
Yes. The objective isn't completion. The objective is initiation. Once you breach the threshold and begin the physical action, the dopamine circuitry begins to engage.
Yeah.
The physics of momentum take over. And it literally requires less energy to keep going than it does to stop.
That's the first prong. The second prong of the action is cognitive. It is what clinician Matt Santi calls the cognitive audit.
Immediately after breaking the freeze and initiating the 5-minute agreement, you conduct metacognitive restructuring. You're in alpha, your brain is receptive, so you ask yourself 3 very specific questions to rewrite the narrative of the trigger.
What are the questions?
Question 1, what belief did this trigger challenge? Question 2, what behavior will I try? Question 3, what emotion might shift?
The clarity of that is profound. So you get the Slack message, the panic hits. You fire the anchor, you drop into alpha, you start the 5-minute agreement of drafting a reply, then you run the audit. What belief did this Slack message challenge?
And you realize, oh, it challenged my fragile belief that I am inherently competent. It made me feel like an imposter.
Right. What behavior will I try? I will try drafting the response for 5 minutes instead of hiding. What emotion might shift? I might move from debilitating terror to mild engagement.
It demystifies the panic entirely. It takes the power away from the invisible, swirling anxiety and pins it to the paper. You are no longer a victim of a biological flood. You are an observer of a biological process.
And when you consistently apply these actions, the anchor, the alpha drop, the 5-minute initiation, and the cognitive audit, you achieve the result. In the framework of transpersonal coaching, specifically Jevon Dansley's methodology, this result is a state of being called open awareness.
Yes. Open awareness.
Let's dissect open awareness. What does that actually feel like in the body and mind compared to the disembodiment we talked about earlier?
Open awareness is the ultimate antidote to the shrinking window of tolerance. It is a profound, expansive state characterized by 3 simultaneous forms of perception. First is introspection.
Meaning looking inward.
Yes, you have a clear metacognitive awareness of your own thoughts and physical sensations, but you are not controlled by them. You observe the anxiety without becoming the anxiety.
That's huge. And second is outrospection. Because your sensory economy isn't entirely depleted by internal panic, you have the bandwidth for heightened empathy. You can actually connect with others. You realize the boss who sent the abrupt Slack message might just be having a terrible day themselves. It is no longer all about you.
Exactly. And third is envirospection. You feel a broad, grounded connection to the physical space around you. You aren't dissociating. You feel the chair supporting you. You hear the ambient noise without it causing a stress spike. It is the ultimate manifestation of personal sovereignty and the complete alignment of the mental, physical, emotional, and energy bodies.
I am feeling deeply empowered by the mechanics of this. I mean, we have the exact blueprint to break the freeze, write the new code in alpha, and achieve open awareness. The engine is finally in gear and moving down the highway.
Oh.
But, right, here is the critical vulnerability. How do we keep the car from stalling out again tomorrow? Because the neuro-warfare doesn't just stop. Life, work, and relationships are going to keep throwing stimuli at the sensory economy.
Sustaining the momentum requires a shift from the individual intervention to systemic support. We have to move from the mind back to the biology and from the isolated self to the collective. Let's return to Dr. Trish Lee's analysis of Napoleon Hill.
Okay, circling back to Hill.
Hill wrote extensively about the concept of the mastermind, the necessity of a group of aligned individuals working in harmony toward a definite purpose.
Which, again, can sound like an outdated concept from a 1930s business networking seminar, like just get in a room with other successful people and talk about your goals.
But modern neuroscience has mapped the literal physical reality of what happens inside a mastermind group. It is a phenomenon called neural synchrony. Inside your brain, you possess mirror neurons. These are specialized cells that fire not only when you take a specific action, but also when you observe someone else taking that action.
They are the biological foundation of empathy and tribal learning.
Right. Exactly. We are evolutionarily wired to entrain to the nervous systems of the people around us. If you are in a tribe and everyone suddenly looks terrified, your mirror neurons trigger your own fight-or-flight response without you even knowing what the threat is. It keeps you alive.
So if you are constantly surrounding yourself with people operating in chaotic, highly stressed, hyper-aroused beta states, your mirror neurons will mimic that chaos. Your baseline anxiety will rise simply by proximity.
And the opposite is also true. When you intentionally construct a mastermind, when you connect with regulated, driven people who operate primarily in coherent alpha states, your brainwave frequencies literally entrain to theirs.
Your baseline is physically elevated by their presence. The mastermind isn't just a group text or a weekly coffee meeting. It is a measurable, coherent, energetic field that stabilizes your own nervous system. When two biologically regulated brains interact, they don't drain each other's sensory economy, they co-create capacity.
But, and this is a massive but, to be a valuable participant in that kind of synchronized collective, you must aggressively protect your own physical hardware. You cannot maintain an alpha state or an open awareness if you're putting garbage fuel into a high-performance engine.
You can't cheat the biology.
You really can't. Cognitive tools like anchoring and auditing will eventually fail under the weight of biological neglect.
Which brings us to physical body optimization. You have to maintain the vessel holding the mental CEO.
You manage this through systemic daily routines. Setting smart, compounding 1% goals, as Matt Santi advocates, tiny, manageable wins that rebuild your dopaminergic baseline over time. And crucially, you must adhere to what dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, calls the PLEASE framework.
PLESE, this is the unglamorous foundational work. Let's break down the acronym.
Okay, so treat physical illness. Do not ignore chronic pain or nagging health issues as they constantly drain your sensory economy. Balance your eating. Avoid massive blood sugar spikes that trigger cortisol release.
Avoid mood-altering substances.
Right. Prioritize sleep, the literal mechanism for neuroplastic repair. And get regular exercise to manually flush the stress hormones from your tissue.
It sounds so incredibly basic, but it is the literal bedrock of emotional regulation. It is the difference between choices that spike your nervous system into chaos versus choices that sustain its coherence.
It's the micro choices.
Yeah, it is the deliberate choice of opting for a steady, focused matcha latte that provides calm, sustained, L-theanine-backed energy rather than downing a massive, highly reactive, sugary coffee that sends you straight into a jittery, heart-pounding beta state crash. You are guarding your physiological baseline so your mental circuit breakers actually have the electrical power to function.
You cannot out-meditate, out-anchor, or out-think a chronically exhausted, highly stimulated, biologically deprived nervous system. The physical body optimization is what keeps the engine running reliably, day after day, trigger after trigger.
Man, the architecture of this deep dive today has been phenomenal. Let's do a quick recap of the exact transformation we have mapped out for you, the listener. We started with the agonizing, paralyzing reality of the frozen start, that specific moment when the sensory economy is overloaded, rejection-sensitive dysphoria hits, and the mental CEO loses all blood flow to the amygdala.
And we rejected the toxic productivity advice of just trying harder. Instead, we intervened at the raw neurological level. We broke the amygdala's freeze using the rapid neuroassociative conditioning of the NLP knuckle anchor, manually resetting the nervous system in seconds.
Once we cleared the gridlock of the beta brainwaves, we used that circuit breaker to drop into the smooth, receptive alpha state. There, we reprogram the ultimate destination using Napoleon Hill's auto-suggestion, planting new directives without the interference of anxiety.
We lock that physical momentum in with the PAR framework, executing the 5-minute agreement to bypass the activation energy hurdle, and utilizing the cognitive audit to process the trigger, ultimately arriving at the expansive state of open awareness.
And finally, we sustain the engine through biology and community. We cultivate neural synchrony by building a mastermind of regulated peers, and we fiercely protect our physiological baseline with the unglamorous but vital please framework.
It is a holistic mechanical system for achieving personal sovereignty over your own neurobiology. And as we conclude, I want to leave you with one final, undeniable truth regarding your capacity for change.
What's the sovereign tip for today?
Your brain is structurally, evolutionarily built for coherence, not for chaos. Because of the immutable law of neuroplasticity, that neurons that fire together wire together, every single time you choose to pause, to fire your physical anchor, to shift into alpha, and to regulate your biology before reacting. You are not just managing a difficult Tuesday. You are literally physically changing the structural density of your brain. You are the architect of your own neuro real estate.
You are the architect of your own neuro real estate. That is an incredible thought to take into tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us for this extensive deep dive. You now possess the biological mechanisms and the practical tools to get that luxury sports car out of neutral, align the chassis, and accelerate onto the open highway.
It's time to drive.
But now that your engine is running flawlessly and your four bodies are aligned, who is actually guiding the overarching vision? Where are we driving this machine? Join us next time for the continuation of the series, The Angel of the Boardroom. Until then, protect your sensory economy and keep the engine warm.